All right, so I'm here with Brad Davis, and we are doing our next level podcast type thing. The topic this time is just thinking about kind of innovation, having a spirit of entrepreneurship and ministry, being able to start new things, push the frontier forward versus just kind of maintaining. And I think that's such an important part of ministry. I picked Brad to have this conversation with, one, because he's been a huge part of that for Focus back in the days when all we were doing was innovating and starting new things.
Yeah.
And he had a big role in getting UTD off the ground, as he was a sophomore leader my first year as kind of campus pastor. Huge, led the charge getting Colin off the ground, led the charge getting UNT off the ground. He started Denton North Church, has started multiple businesses. So he's got a ton of experience in this, and we did our best to sort of group some of these questions. We got a lot of questions, so we may not get to all of them today. We won't get to all of them today. But what I was going to do this time is they're grouped in kind of categories, and so I'm going to kind of ask sort of 3, 4 questions at a time, and then we'll talk about. We may not really address all of them directly, but the first category is sort of discernment and calling. So these are questions like, how do you discern when you're called to start something new versus remain faithful where you are? How do you know if an idea is truly good or just exciting because it's new? And if Focus were to sort of move in a totally different direction, what might that look like? How would we discern something like that it's time, like, the cloud has picked up and is going somewhere else? And then could you ever see Focus leaving DFW? So do you want to take it away, or you want me to take it away? We're going to start.
No, yeah, I'd love to start. I think just to start us off, being an entrepreneur is the etymology of it is you swim out and you grasp at something. That's the etymology. I mean, that's just what it kind of originally meant, which is kind of funny because when you're swimming out, there's not much to grasp around you.
Mhm.
So I think any kind of innovation or entrepreneurial, endeavors are going to have a certain amount of risk.
Yeah.
And have a certain amount of just not knowing what to expect. And some people are kind of cut out for that. Some people aren't. I think you don't necessarily have to be an entrepreneurial person necessarily to do entrepreneurial things when you have a good team and things around you. Because, for instance, for me, yes, I naturally like to do new things, but it's also a problem for me because I often tend to take it all on myself and don't bring about a team, don't trust God with it. And so I think for people who are not naturally entrepreneurial, being able to really trust God and know that this is something that God's given us the ability to do, to be innovative and creative, can really help us in our faith. So yeah, sure, there are some people who are more or less creative and entrepreneurial, but I don't think that's a requirement for doing entrepreneurial stuff. Yeah. So with that said, I think in terms of the exciting or just a good idea, I don't think it has to be either or. To me, doing something new is exciting. And I think there's a part of it. It's like anything, learning something new is exciting. As long as you know along with that it's going to be hard work. If not actual hard work, although it usually is, it's going to be hard mental work. Just like thinking about creating something, innovating something out of nothing. But I love our axiom that the best ideas are still out there, because that just means our world is constantly changing and there are like some way better ways of doing things that are spirit-led things. So that gets me very excited. Yeah. I don't think it necessarily has to be either an exciting thing or a good thing.
I think sometimes what I see in like staff meetings, and it's like some people are much more naturally, like they're creatives, they love thinking of new ideas, and they even just like doing new things. I think a lot of it, to me, in terms of that, boils down to as best I can weighing risks and rewards. In life in general, you kind of find this thing of like high risk, high reward, potential, low risk potential, low reward potential, but that's not always the truth. And especially when it comes to like ideas of things we could try, I'm like, sometimes people will come up with a 10 times more complicated thing to do, activity to do, to interact. And I'm like, that's a lot of work, but I don't know that it gets us anything that doing the simple activity didn't get us.
Right.
And so I think sometimes being able to think through that, but I would say that with that said, one of the rewards that you sort of factor in is my own motivation of doing something new versus just doing what I've always done. So if I think but it's just one of them. It's like it's not a good enough reason to do something that costs 10 times as much for this same, but if it's not a big play and I'm just like, I'm bored of that. Like I think there's been a lot of things we've changed because the staff was bored of it.
Sure.
The students aren't bored of it. They've had done it once or twice, but we've done it 12 times and we're over it. And so sometimes I'm like, yeah, I think that's a factor in that. Yeah, what do you think about this idea of calling? Being called to something new versus remaining faithful.
Yeah, calling is one of those words that I think has a lot to unpack, particularly when it comes to work and vocation. But in regard to starting something, I think calling is a rare thing if we're talking about God calling us to do something. When I came to UTD, I had nothing was drawing me there other than focus. I had my own plan. I wanted to do my own thing. And probably I can count on my hands how many times God has called me, meaning gave me a strong sense of this is what he wants me doing. And one of those was actually the first of those was going to UTD and being a part of that. The other times that I've started like Colin or UTD, I don't think I had near as strong a calling that God was saying, hey, go here. I think it was more just an opportunity. And one of the things that's so awesome about God is he's not this like, you do everything right, perfect.
Yeah.
He gives us this amazing ability to go out and explore and create and mess up. And that's just all a part of what he's designed into how to live.
Yeah.
So I think we don't have to have this huge pressure. Like I feel a lot of pressure in my business to make money and to make sure I take care of my employees. I think when you're doing ministry, you get to rely more on God doing those things. Again, not that it's not hard work. So I don't know. I don't feel like I ever feel really super called to do the starting stuff. In some ways, this is going to kind of be funny, but I get a little bored. And then I kind of want to go do something challenging and new.
Well, I think two sort of fallacies that I see with this calling thing. One is that we think calling is going to mean a script. Like if I'm called to do this thing, like God is going to lay out every single step. And I think there are sometimes I do think that as a ministry, we have discerned that we are called to all of these campuses in DFW.
Yeah.
Now,
I
don't feel like we've ever had a sense of exactly which campuses are included.
Sure.
Because there are a lot of campuses that are sort of in the fringes of being a college campus, and it's this building that Colin has continuing ed for adults in, it's a campus, but it doesn't mean college students at it, or whatever. It's and then and that's sort of a moving target. But I don't know that means just because we have this calling that God is going to script which year we start which campus. We've had very little of that. I think a couple of them, we were the cloud seems to have moved. It's time to follow God to Denton, or it's time to follow God to Arlington. But most of them, it hasn't been that clear cut. So we have to make some decisions and calls. When are we going to try this? When are we going to do this?
Sure.
And then I think the other thing is that the other fallacy is I think sometimes we think of calling as very individualistic. God only calls me to do something specific. But I think, in the case of God called us to do this. And that us is a moving target.
Sure.
We're passing that calling on. But that was Israel. They got a calling at Sinai. And by the time any one of us are reading it, those people have been long dead. But we still see that as we're called to be a holy people, a divine priesthood. It's this, but we aren't that was only the original generation that was at Sinai.
Right.
It's no, that's their calling, and they have to figure out how to live that out. So I think sometimes when we get together and talk about how are we going to get to these community colleges, we are talking about living out our calling, but who's going to do that, how it's going to look, we're going to figure some of that out. So I think there's a little bit of a false dichotomy of remaining faithful versus called to start something new. I think we're called to both.
Yeah.
And I
Me
think
too.
we've got to be pretty creative and then also just leave open the opportunity that God may be like, Brad, you're gonna go do this, and or it's, you guys, it's time to plant UTA, figure it out.
Right.
And that he has that prerogative. He just doesn't seem to use it all the time.
Right. Yeah, sure.
What about, would you ever see Focus leaving DFW? Do you have thoughts on that versus
Man,
him?
that's a tough one. Gosh, I don't. Yeah, I definitely do, long term. But that's one of those questions where it's just a lot harder to think
Mm-hmm.
when. I mean, as an organization gets bigger, there's going to be an opportunity at some point.
Yeah.
And that's the real question: is when that opportunity comes, is it worth taking? Do we have a good sense of God
Mm-hmm.
wants us there or not?
Yeah.
But it definitely could. I don't. There's no doubt in my mind.
Well, I have two thoughts. I'm like, one, the language I've been using with our staff lately that I just, as I was reflecting, kind of came to me is, yes, I think God has assignments for us beyond DFW, but I don't think he's going to make those clear until we've done what he's already given us to do.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think rather than worrying about, okay, how are we going to do this? It's like, no, we've been given a very challenging calling, which is to get to these community colleges and what other campuses we need to be at.
Sure.
And we need to keep our focus there until we're, within spitting distance at least, and we're not quite that close. And then two, I think it's interesting of like, would I see focus? No, I actually don't, because what's interesting, we've been boxed into this corner of like, with our trademark and our name, like we have an agreement with Catholic Focus that we will use this name. We have the name in North Texas, and they have the name everywhere else. And I think that goes with what God was doing all along, which is the organization, I don't think will grow beyond like the incorporated legal entity of Focus. The impact, I think, will grow far beyond.
Sure.
And I think that, but we're going to do that like the family of churches has done it. It's like, you're going to go be a church in Denton, but we're not in charge of you anymore.
Yeah.
We're not you don't have to come report to us. You're going to be free, and we'll give you anything we've got. We'll share resources, but we're going to do that out of friendship, not hierarchy.
I like that. That's exciting.
So that's what I think.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot coming. Will it be under the name Focus? Yeah, who knows? I think a lot of things would have to happen first.
Sure.
And then I'll comment just briefly and see what you think. If we were going to move in a different direction, what might that look like? I don't know exactly what that question is asking. The way I read it is sort of like, we've had a certain set of values and practices, and that we've stuck largely to. Would we ever like throw that playbook out the window and do something else? I'm like, well, yes, but the threshold would have to be high. And I think, to me, it's always mission driven. A lot of things I see other ministries doing, I don't really want to imitate, because I don't see them either making or maturing disciples. And everything we've done has been about trying to hold those two goals in tension. And I think we've, by God's grace, done that better than most places that I've seen. Not everywhere, but most, and so I think some of the more attractional models are great at getting people in the door and very poor at maturing. And some of the older models are, it's like, yeah, people learn the Bible and live long lives for God, but no one's coming in the door.
Yeah.
And so I think for us to really change our core playbook, which I see us needing to do at like the community colleges, at least to some degree, the core question for me is always going to be the mission. Like that we keep that. Why are we doing what we're doing? What are we trying to get done? Getting a bunch of people in a room is not what we're trying to get done. And I would rather make and mature a handful of disciples than build some big club.
Yeah.
And that, so yeah, I think we've got to just, we do need to be able to experiment. And that means we may need to try some things that we're like, yeah, that's not really getting at our mission, and go back. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the culture has really remained the same from the beginning,
Mhm.
because it's driven by the mission. So there's a lot of things that have changed, but the culture and what you see 15 years ago, what you see today is still there. That people really care for each other, they're in relationships, and they're serving God. So in that sense, there's not going to be huge changes. How that all plays out will change, but
Mhm.
that big part of the culture is going to
Yeah.
always be there.
So next set of questions is like balancing the new with the current. So I'm gonna ask 3 of these questions to start because they all are sort of getting at the same general thing. When starting something new, how do you avoid neglecting current responsibilities and relationships? Um, 2, when is it wise to delegate, stop doing older things, or unload responsibilities to make room for something new? And then 3, how do you make room for creative thinking and planning when you already feel overwhelmed? I think my initial, I'm like, yeah, it is hard because you do have to cut stuff. And that's, I think that one of the things I teach whenever I do like our strategic thinking, or I think the very first thing I do when I do strategic thinking with our younger staff is I'm like, strategic thinking is 2 key questions. Usually people only ask one of them. We ask, what are we going to do? And I'm like, but the other question is, what are we not going to do?
Yeah.
It's like, and being strategic with that, I'm going to decide the things I'm not going to do anymore. And so, yeah, to create room, and again, on a big team, that's not just a me decision. So when I'm looking, I often sit down with my journal, maybe once a semester, evaluate all my commitments, all my things, pray prayerfully, reflectively. I often feel like the Lord guides me to like some things that maybe I should delegate or stop or minimize. I'm only going to do that a quarter as often or whatever that is. But I still typically take that to my team and some of my core people. I'm thinking about only meeting with this guy once a month. What do Mandy and Peter think of that? I'm thinking about giving this responsibility over to this younger staff. What do they think about that? So that is because it affects more than just me. Um, but so yeah, it starts with God, starts with other people, but ultimately, like someone's got to go.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, and that something is typically going to be good. It's something good.
Oh yeah, sure.
And
Yeah, when I transitioned from my welding business to my car business, I had to let some guys go and hire new guys. And I think what's a big part of this question is I've gotten somewhat comfortable in some of my relationships, feel like we're good friends, feel like there's a lot of good mentorship, and the thought of taking on new people is scary.
Mhm.
But I think that should always be a part of our lives. And if we've gotten a little too far into close relationships and not really letting our schedule be open to newer friendships, we're already in trouble in the environment we're in, regardless of having to move to a new environment and then all of a sudden leave some of our wind down some of our past relationships.
Mhm.
I felt this again very strongly when I had to hire my dealer team. It's like I loved all these guys and we had our own routines and I just didn't want to. And all these new people I saw as like weird and maybe they're not funny enough and maybe we're not going to mesh. But I just had to do it if I was gonna move. And I think had I done it differently, I would have kind of slowly hired some of those people. And I think that's what we've got to do in our one-on-one relationships. We've always got to leave room open for new relationships and new people. It's mission, it's evangelism. And so to me, it feels like a lot of times what people are really saying is I'm gonna leave those relationships and which ones and how I do all that and what Brandon's saying that matters. Talking to God, figuring out all of those things.
Yeah.
But it gives you a chance at really kind of going back to the square one when it comes to the relationship stuff, where you are not very comfortable. It is a little bit tougher. I remember, and I think this is probably still the same as a Corfa. Some guys I would be connected with in 2 or 3 weeks, and some guys it would take 2 or 3 years before I give out like their friendships. We just have to have both of those relationships in our lives.
Well, and I think a part of mentorship is the release. Not that it's a complete release, but I remember, I think my parents were really purposeful with this as I was getting older. Like, when I was at college, I see so many parents now that are just so overbearing on their kids. It's like they're calling every day. You have to talk to me. I need your location. I need this. And whereas I actually remember getting frustrated at times with my parents where it was like, they really wouldn't talk to me unless I called them. And I still saw them at church. And so it wasn't just exclusively that, but now I see, I was like, oh, they were trying to like take a step back and let me determine
That's right.
some of that. And I think sometimes we're afraid of that. It's like, I've mentored this person. it's been a big deal. The release is like, what do you really need from me? What do you
Yep.
really want from me? And sometimes you have to push them away a little bit more. Like you need some other people.
Yeah, it's very
You're
similar
leaning too hard.
to
Yeah.
like you having an adult relationship with your parents. Like think about how
Hmm.
much better your adult relationship with your parents is than your kid relationship. Well, if
Mhm.
you're really going to mentor people, you've got to release them so they can have a more adult relationship with you, and that's on their terms.
Mhm.
And that is kind of scary. But you got to do it if you're
Yeah.
going to build that into a much bigger friendship. I think later on.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's some of that is as we're releasing relationships and things like that. And I do this law of diminishing returns type thing. I probably shared this before, but I had the conversation with a number of staff over time that, it's like, yeah, it's great. It's really good to meet weekly with people. And that's so great for FOJ and maybe like supervision and things. But there comes a point where I'm like, but now is meeting with them 4 times a month twice as good as meeting with them twice a month?
That's right. Yeah.
And I'm like, no. Is it 4 times better than meeting with them once a month? I'm like, a lot of guys, I'm like, once a month, I can do a lot of what I can do. And then we have the phone, like where the connection is alive, and they don't need that much from me. They have other relationships they need to prioritize. And so sometimes, but that creates space in both of our schedules for new things without just abandoning
Yep.
the old relationship.
And I think too, when you graduate and you get out of the kind of focused environment, that's more adult life.
Yeah.
It's not in so I've seen people, it's like, I don't meet with them weekly, we're not good friends, or I'm not mentoring them. I'm like, yeah, you can't do that when
Yeah.
you're working 9 to 5. It's
Yeah.
not going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's much more indicative of an adult relationship.
And then this other question was about balancing new with what we were already doing. I thought was a great one. It is, how does this balance differ between like a smaller campus where everyone's sort of doing everything and a larger campus team where people maybe are a little more specialized in their roles? And I had a couple of thoughts. I had a conversation with Peter this week about we're talking about like training people up to do things we're doing, and I was sharing this with you earlier too. I think sometimes when we think about new, it's like new means we've only been doing it like 3 months, and there's this kind of famous statistic of 90% of startups fail. But the actual statistic is that 90% of startups fail within the first 10 years.
Yeah.
And so, when I look at like Mihente or Bliss on UTD campus that are like 4 or 5 years old, I'm like, those are still startups.
Yeah.
Like Andrea and Layla are doing something new. It doesn't maybe feel new to them. It's been most of their ministry life, but we are still trying to get those things off the ground. We're still trying to figure out how to do them. TCU is still very much a startup. We're in our, it's like we're right at the beginning. And so then I think on the bigger teams, especially, sometimes it's like we've got to constantly be giving our stuff away. And I'm like, yeah, but it's okay for me to do the same thing for a few years. I think when I start seeing the writing on the wall, I need to train someone else. But training someone, beyond the rudimentary things of if I'm like out for a few weeks or something, but to do my job when they're not going to actually do my job for 8 years. It's like, you're kind of wasting your time. Like
Sure.
they're not going to remember all that.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to kind of be, and especially if it's something I'm still enjoying, still building, still growing in, like it can be, I can still be doing something new, even though I've been doing it for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Being in my 9th year of business, so much has changed. And even now, I'm making a major decision this year. And I think part of that newness is that it's still fragile. You're still swimming out and trying to grasp at something that's going to last and stick. I think I heard, I can't remember where from, but that we generally overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 5.
Yeah.
And that's helpful because I think that's a pretty true statement. We have to guard against these, okay, it's a calendar year, a calendar month, and I've got to have expectation. This has to be done. That's an efficiency model, and that's not how God works.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think those larger chunks of time, do make sense in terms of thinking long term about, this is still new. 10 years is still new.
Yeah. Well, and as I was saying earlier, it's like one of the conversations I've had over and over again, basically every year, is people telling me they're not doing any evangelism because they haven't met anyone new in the last few weeks. And I'm like, yeah, but you're studying with two non-Christians,
Yeah, right.
or like iffy Christians at best. You're studying the Bible with them that came in this year. I'm like, that's evangelism.
Yeah.
Like, finish what you started, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's still evangelism. And so I think there's this. Sometimes when we think of innovating, we think that means constant change, but I don't think it
No.
does.
No.
The next set of questions was like vision, values. So how do you protect the overall vision and values while innovating? Great question. How do you protect unity when moving in a direction that not everyone understands? And yeah, it's like you get different levels of buy-in. How do you inspire people in stable communities to be ready to build something new? And then let's just do those three first.
Okay. Yeah, these are great questions, and they to kind of think about them. I think one of the things about the unity thing that I do think was tricky for me is, being in a startup environment can be very, what's the term for it? Like memory intensive. Like you're doing something and you're going to have a lot of memories from it later on. And so that can be really fun and exciting, but it can also make you very narrow-minded and territorial. And I think that's what happened to me a lot early on in starting ministries, was it became my deal or my team's deal, and it was like our territory, and not giving it kind of a bigger picture of unity. And I think sometimes people with my personality can get very narrow-minded when you're doing something, you're in charge, you're starting this, it's all about my deal. So making sure, the only thing that kept me from not doing that was having a team of people around me who were much more team players. So I think that is very important, is having a team that bring in all of those values along with you. Does that make sense? That's kind of how I experienced that. So the unity one, and then the values one.
I'll talk about the unity thing.
Okay.
Because I think one thing I've seen, this is kind of my new hobby horse. Like I don't even know how to get out of this. I think it's kind of like, I remember wrestling with envy in my own heart. And a lot of times that was over ministry and ministry skill. And I'm like, what's the opposite of envy? I think the opposite of envy is being thankful for your blessings that you got them. and that's what I started doing in my own like prayer life and stuff, is like anything I found myself envious of, I started thanking God for giving that to that person, and trying to like praise him for that. And I think when we get into ministry and we start like, I'm doing this and you're doing that, we start judging each other. And I think a lot of the opposite of this judging is like celebrating, and some of it goes back to what I was saying about individual versus collective calling. I think the body of Christ on earth is called to do all sorts of things, but often we interpret that as then I'm supposed to do all those things.
Right.
So like the one I see so much in our culture right now is, the Black evangelical church is so committed to social justice and is just kind of judgy of the white evangelical church, who is so committed to like evangelism but not social justice, and then they're judgy back, and everyone's like, well, what we're doing is the one important thing. And I'm like, no, both of those are important to Jesus, and we're all just collectively making up the body of Christ. And so the body of Christ collectively is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Can we celebrate that someone else is doing something that I don't have the time or bandwidth to do?
That's right.
And so I think it is one of the challenges with unity when you start new things, is like the people that are doing the new thing, pride tempts them to think, well, this is the important thing. This is the most important thing that God is most pleased with, and vice versa. And I think so much of it's learning to celebrate, like, we are doing this. Even if I never stepped foot, I've never gone since we started TCU to TCU, but that's my ministry, right? And if they need me, I'm there in a heartbeat, but they haven't asked me to come. So I don't need to go butt in, but I can celebrate what they're doing. But also I don't get anything from Rhett and Lindsay like, well, we are doing the real work of God, and you people who are just, reaching out at UTD aren't. It's like, no, it's unity comes when we can celebrate what God is doing in and through the other people. And that comes from a secure sense that I'm like, God loves me and he's proud of me. And I don't need to be better than you for that to be true.
Yeah, that's right.
So, oh,
And God is the one doing the work in the
yeah,
first place.
absolutely.
So why is it that when we're not making anything grow or watering and planting, why even argue about
Yeah.
which one's doing what? So yeah, it makes sense.
Great point.
I think about the question about bringing people along or how to encourage people. It's tough. It's always going to be tough. There are going to be people who, thankfully, I guess in college it's a little bit easier because you've got people who are kind of down to just up and move or up and do something different.
Mhm.
But I think you've got to paint a vision
Mhm.
for people of what it is to start something that didn't exist. And it really is a lot of fun. It's just, I mentioned this already, but just the memories you have. When we started UNT, we had 2 little apartments and we were right across from each other and had like 8 people
Mhm.
in like a 2-bedroom. And there was just a ton of memories. It was just really fun. And it was exciting. And there's just this kind of maybe closeness, a different kind of closeness, not a better kind of closeness that you get from teams starting off.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things, and this is probably one of my biggest lessons I learned pretty early on with starting stuff, is your core group of people will come later. Your starting group of people is generally pretty different.
Yeah.
And pretty weird. And so there's just some kind of weirdness and uniqueness about starting something and not having structures in place, not having a lot of everybody kind of gets a say, try some stuff out. And so I think that can be a selling point for people who maybe are stuck with what they're doing or a little afraid of, kind of getting out of the routine. There's just it's kind of a lot of fun. I mean, I just remember a lot of fun from starting stuff. There's just something about that that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
What else? What would you, getting people to?
I think some of it is. I think you have to hold it loosely. If you try and do the like spearfishing of like, I want to select these 2 or 3 people.
Yeah.
You may just get disappointed, because
that's right.
They may not be there. They may not want to make that sacrifice, and that doesn't make them bad. It's just, and so it's more net fishing, right? Like I cast my net and see, and see what's going to come. And I think we've started ministries with people that we just wouldn't have scripted it that way.
No.
But it's great. So I like to kind of, what you're saying, share the vision with the bigger group and sort of see who it pings. Back at January 2nd or something, we did a staff day and I talked about the need to innovate, start new community college campuses. And then I've just kind of been listening. And it's kind of, we have a dog barking fest behind us. But it's kind of been interesting how, even as we're doing like annual reviews and things like that, how certain people are, they're pinging their supervisors like, actually, I've been thinking a lot about that community college thing since then. I'm listening, my ears are, perk up immediately to think, well, maybe we can build a team like that. So, and how do we protect values and vision while innovating? That's a very important question.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think, to me, some of it just goes back to that you've got to pick the most important stuff and make sure that's there, and then don't worry about all the minor stuff. My meeting doesn't have to look like a TNF meeting.
Yeah.
What matters is the people who are showing up are walking up to people who are there and actually excited about meeting them. Like, that's what matters, because that's a mission thing and a culture thing. It doesn't matter that we do instruments or we don't do instruments. When we started calling, I was leading music. If you've ever heard me sing, it was awful. And I was using those old projectors, like it didn't have to be polished. Polish is not in our repertoire until we get bigger and have multiple people doing that. So I think you just have to kind of pick those things that are most important. And then not worry about all the minor things, because you can get distracted by making sure all the minor things are right and then miss the major things needing to be there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it's, there's obviously a danger in losing your values. but there's equally a danger in over protecting them.
Yeah.
And just so I'm like, we've tried to really streamline it. Like we're making maturing disciples, and our values are essentially like Jesus is Lord, real friendships, and we're going to develop leaders. I'm like, we can do that a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And then
That's
and
right.
then I see us, it's like, well, we've got to do core, and we've got to do, and core has to be at night and it has to be in a home, and it has to have this and this. And
Right.
and I'm like, no, we don't got to do any of that stuff.
Mm.
Like we, where are they? When are they? Like core was just an attempt to get away from the like we're just kind of doing church or just doing Bible study to like, no, we're gonna have real relationships and try to make these like spiritual friendships happen. And FOJ is our way of like, all right, we're gonna personalize this and like Jesus needs to be your Lord.
That's right.
And we felt like Core and FOJ both gave us ways to make a lot of people leaders, which is a developing leaders tool. Like that it's not, I'm like, I could do a better job teaching FOJ as a class, but that would not accomplish our goal of developing leaders. And so but we can do that in other ways. And we
Yeah.
got to keep that, I just think being willing to go back. I make fun of Mandy all the time because in these meetings, she's always like asking what sounds like the dumbest question. We're like arguing about how many activities to plan at winter retreat. And she's like, why do we even do winter retreat? And, and we're like, I'm not having that discussion. But she's not asking us to reevaluate doing winter retreat. She's calling us to restate our goals. Because once we've restated our goals for winter retreat, a lot of those other discussions become a lot easier.
Yeah.
We don't do winter retreat for everyone to play sports.
Yeah, that's right.
So if a sport doesn't promote relationships, cut it.
Yep.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, we do that.
Why do we even do it?
Right. Well, we do that even with our kids at church. It's
Uh-huh.
like the some days that we can't go outside and walk around, we got board games, but we intentionally chose board games because our group is so new, where they get to interact with each other, not where it's a competition for individual people. They're either on teams or same thing.
Yeah. Okay, next category, starting alone versus with a team. What are the key differences between starting something on your own versus with a team? Which I think they're probably picturing like being sent to a campus by yourself or like into a new group of people by yourself versus with a group. And then like with less people, what matters most? With more people, what matters most? I don't know. I think we've been pretty committed to team planting.
Yeah.
I think what's different, like I don't think Brad started anything alone in terms of ministry, but he didn't start with a staff team. But I think what people don't realize is how much those students were our staff.
Oh yeah.
Like the Corfas, what we do in staff meetings now, we did in Corfa meetings then. Like they just had to help us think through every event and put on every event and do so we would start with a team of students, and of course we were the age of some of the youngest staff members on these teams when we were starting. But
what's funny about answering that question is immediately I'm like, who's asking this? No one ever sends anyone alone to start a campus. And the reason I'm thinking that is because when I went alone on staff, I never saw myself as alone. I thought now I'm realizing, I didn't have a big staff, but all of those students were my staff.
Yeah.
And I considered them my staff.
Like our team UNG was like 14 people when we started.
Thinking back, I'm like, oh, I just in my memory all saw them as staff people, even though they were students. That's what they were.
And I think sometimes I think that's something we miss because we're so used to this pastor-student divide. And so when we go, like I am often trying to collect a group of students, but then I think we keep them in the like place that they are at the big universities rather than giving them this bigger role to help define the direction, which I'm like, if there's 4 people on a campus and 2 are pastors and 2 are students, I'm like, that's the team. Yeah. It's not a 2-person team leading 2 students. That's the team.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Is pioneering more of a calling for certain people than for others?
I kind of address this. When you're doing team pioneering, I don't think it necessarily needs to be a calling for one person or other. Some people it's going to be more comfortable, but what I find is that there are aspects of pioneering stuff that are going to be equally comfortable and uncomfortable for certain people. So I don't feel that way. Although I do want to give some, I guess credence to the idea that, yeah, I mean, there are evangelists versus
Mhm.
teachers versus, apostles,
Mhm.
whatever. So I don't know. It's one of those hard questions to answer for me. What
Mhm.
do you think?
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, certainly yes, in the sense that God might call a specific individual to go do something.
Sure.
And I'm like, well, then yes, it is more them than other people. I think people are shaped for different roles in terms of how well they can do that. But I also think there's always this tension of like Paul talks about people having the gift of teaching, but he also just tells Christians to
That's right.
teach one another.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm like, it's a lot of times that's a matter of degree and special ability versus we all have the ability to do some of this stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
the first big pioneering of churches did not happen because of a strategic meeting and a set of spiritual gifts. It happened because Stephen got killed and the church scattered,
Had to, yeah.
and wherever they went, they preached. And so, which reminds me in some ways of the Tower of Babel narrative. And I wonder if they were staying put too long.
It's possible.
And God
Yeah.
allowed some bad things to happen so that they would spread out.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That's right.
The scripture doesn't say that, but I think the
No.
question can be raised. So the next set of questions is all about building and developing the right team. And so it touches on some of this, but this really made me laugh. When launching something new, do you put your best people or your most available people at the start?
You do.
You hope they're the same.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true too.
No.
No, I'll repeat it again because I think it was so freeing for me after starting Colin. I was wondering why it was taking so long for me to build a bigger core group of leaders other than the people I kind of brought. And the
Mhm.
reason is because when you start stuff, generally people who want to come to something that's on the ground floor are going to be a little bit atypical.
Mm.
They're more comfortable in kind of weird structureless situations. And I don't know, this could have just been for no, I mean honestly it was same for maybe I just draw weird people around me. I don't know what that is, but Denton, Colin, and UNT, we just had kind of a strange group of initial people that for the most part all phased out. And it wasn't until 2 or 3 or 4 years later that we really built a good core of leaders that lasted longer.
Well, I remember, I mean, I have not gone with any of these church plants, but I was there and like a college student when Northeast Garland started. And it was interesting those early years because the original kind of core leader team, it's like you have no structure. Everyone is, kind of leading their ideas, implementing, doing stuff. It's just kind of a small group of people talking. And as you get bigger, structure has to happen. And I saw a number of those original leaders like transition out to other things, sometimes happily, sometimes
Yeah.
angrily, because their influence lessened.
That's right.
As other people took on more specific roles, but some of that's just kind of the nature of the beast. It's the nature of growth. It's it's kind of like me and my wife who have no kids right now living life together, and versus if we had 5 kids, how structured would our lives have to be at that point
Right.
to get everything done? And would we have to maybe hire some help? And would we, it's just that kind of thing. It's like with the kids, the older kids have to have jobs that are specific to help us with that's just part of it. And I think you have to be okay with some of that. It's like, yeah, God will often, maybe someone does leave mad because they don't have the influence they had. Does that make them a bad person? No. But they may need to go help start something else new. They've got experience now. So I think we have to be a little like more magnanimous, grace filled for the whole process because it's not always neat and clean. And I mean, I do hope sometimes that my best people will make themselves available. I would often ask who's my ideal to go do this with? Not the entire team, but at least 2 or 3 people. And I'm going to pitch it to them, but some of them may say no. And some of them may make themselves available. Your best people will often be busy, but not always, because sometimes I'm like, I've got some people on our team, or that have been on our team before that are like nearing the point where their kids are going to school. And I'm like, ooh, in the next 2 or 3 years, they might come back into play.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, one of my best people might be available for the first time in a couple of years. So you never know.
Yeah.
What qualities should you look for when planting a campus or launching an initiative? And what qualities would you not want to have on that team?
Ooh. Let's see my notes here. Oh, well, I think probably one of the most obvious ones is, and all you gotta do is like watch one of these Survivor shows or Trader. I heard that was your favorite
No,
show.
of course, traders.
People who have a tendency to
Lie.
create conflict, because the team does matter initially, and you want to have a lot of those fun memories. And if you've got someone who's constantly
just a source of conflict,
it's just going to reverberate much louder than in a larger group. So I think people who are overly sensitive to relational stuff can be challenging in those groups, or people who just don't deal with conflict well, or a source of conflict. There's just a lot of close encounters and a lot of spending a lot of time with the same people over and over again.
Well, and especially people that can't easily differentiate between ideological conflict and interpersonal conflict.
That's right.
Like, yeah, because there are people that's like, I can argue with all day long and it doesn't, no skin off my back, or theirs, we're fine. But there's other people's that like that blurs the line way too. They can't handle disagreeing.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, that's a hard person to lead alongside.
Yeah. I think sometimes the real strong personalities can be helpful, but you just have to still have people who are willing to follow a leader. Because sometimes in those earlier times, you do have to have a leader make decisions. And sometimes it can be a majority. It can feel a lot like a majority rule, because it kind of is. You're getting a lot of impact, but you still have to have people who are willing to follow. You can't have the problem of having two leaders, sort of official and unofficial leader in a smaller group. So being able to follow, I think, is a big one. And then I think just people who are generally flexible.
Yes.
Because if you get pretty inflexible people, you're going to have a constant problem with, okay, but it has to be this way, or it has to be that, or I can't make this work. You just kind of have to have people who.
Or at UTD we did it this way, or
you have to have an ability for people to kind of be a little bit flexible. That inflexibility can just shut down a lot of ideas pretty quickly, or sour the group on their own understanding of their success, because it's constantly being compared to something else or whatever else. Those would be me.
Yeah.
A couple ones I have.
No, I think those are great. I mean, I think it feels at times like unspiritual or selfish to say like, if I'm going to go into that, I want to work with fun people, but we've kind of enshrined that in some ways in our hiring. Like, we use the 3 C's of chemistry, character, and competency. Like, we are looking for chemistry. I don't want to work with people that it doesn't make them bad at all if they just don't fit well with us. And then we use these 3 F's of fire, fruit, and fun. And I'm like, yeah, fun is a big deal to me.
It is a big deal.
And especially doing campus ministry. Like, if you're not fun, it's going to be really hard to connect with college students.
Yeah.
And so, and
absolutely.
if you're not having fun, working those extra hours, doing, it's like I've been using this illustration lately, that one of the things I've learned I like more as an adult is I like playing cooperative board games more than playing competitive ones, because often I am competitive. And so when I play competitive board games, it's like I have fun if I'm winning, or I don't have fun if I'm losing. But if I play a cooperative board game, I have fun even if we all lose. Maybe not quite as much fun as winning is fun, but like losing together can kind of be its own fun, and we laugh and we do this. And I would say that with some of the the fails in an early ministry. It's like, okay, so we had this event and 0 people showed up, but our team of 10 that we love being around showed up and we had a great idea.
So successful.
And so not letting it be this big bummer of like, and then years later, you're like, remember when we planned this and 0 people came?
Yeah.
All of that those are fun memories. So yeah, I just think it's something that it has to be a factor. And then there's kind of like a couple of developmental questions. How do we develop leaders who can pioneer, start new things? How do you foster creativity in people who tend to be like status quo maintainers?
Mm-hmm. I lost my notes, but I have.
We're in section 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you didn't give me the section. So
Oh, sorry. It's on the other. It's on the other tab.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
The one I didn't look at.
In the other tab.
I've been trying my best to
Sorry.
follow these.
Yeah,
all
no.
over this.
I'm
like,
going through this. Yeah. I don't know. Fostering creativity is a hard one. I've definitely heard the arguments that like everyone's naturally creative. It's been like, ground out of us. And I'm like, I think there's probably some truth to that. But also I'm like, I was not a very artistic kid. I was a very imaginative kid. Like, I think we have our own way. Like, I don't think everyone is creative in the same way. I think some people like innovating in more incremental ways, improving things, tweaking things. And some people are like, I want to do something that's never been done. And I don't know that you're going to necessarily turn those into the opposite. That's where teams come in. But I do think there's ways to practice, and I think it is something we have to practice because I think we get lazy. Creativity takes a different kind of mental effort.
It does.
And so I think there are ways to be, I know Peter with like our Grove planning team, the Grovers. I mean, he's done some different things. Like, you have to come with a new idea every week. And like, you're going to report it to the team and we're going to evaluate it. And that can be helpful, but it also can generate way more ideas than we can ever do. And do we need a new idea every week for the Grove? Or the Grove's a year and a half old. Like, how much do we need to be in it? It is an innovation. So you have to balance all those things. But I think some of the development just comes from being thrown in the deep end.
Yeah, sure.
So I don't know.
I'm big into this. I think there's one thing that we've got to start with is differentiating between artistic and creativity. Too many people think of them as the same, that our creativity has to look really good or be super impressive. Mm-hmm. But creativity does not have to be impressive. When I do my intern class or apprentice class at the end of each semester, everyone's got to create their own piece of fiction. And I think the way that we do that is by just sitting, imagining, kind of thinking about our story. It's a part of our brain that's a lot less, facts and information and more just like dreaming. And I think one of the neat things about, what we've done over the years with Focus or our churches is that we really do let people kind of like dream dreams. We have this really neat activity from UNT where people wrote their kind of vision for the campus and their I can't remember the other one. It was like anyway, I found the book the other day and it was pretty neat, just what people dreamed. And we asked them, like, really think through a dream you have, a vision of what this could possibly look like. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of activities in that that will help people. But I think part of the way you get people to think through that is by actually including those activities in staff meetings and things.
Yeah.
Where we're dreaming here, we're thinking through something, write something. You just have to do it. And there's not a lot of creative space. I don't think we don't tend to think about that in a lot of our meetings and things. But that activity itself of just kind of dreaming helps people, I think, a lot.
And I think some people do that better alone and some people do that better in conversation.
That's absolutely right.
I'm more conversation. Like, I'll have ideas, but those ideas don't go very far just from me sitting around. Like, they go far when I'm like, I have lunch with someone and I'm like, I was thinking about this, and then they bring something up and I'm like, and then the next person I bring it to, I bring this newly refined idea to, like, oh, I was talking with Brad about this. And and then we thought this, and then they're like, well, what about this? And I was like, oh yeah. And then the next person it's like, so I think I've learned this collaborative thing of like, I love to go back and forth, but some people that's not their thing.
Sure.
They want to sit and like dream and imagine, and I'm like, that's great. We need both. We need a lot
Yeah,
of
that's
things.
more how I think I do it. So that's a good point.
Yeah. Okay, last category. There's 6 questions in this, and for today's session. This one's like, it's called innovation and just processes around this. So
Okay.
I'm gonna take these more individually.
Okay.
How do you brainstorm and evaluate new ideas? I was like, I like that question
Mm-hmm.
because I do think brainstorming, there was this fad of brainstorming. I was like, there's no bad ideas. There's tons of bad ideas.
A lot of bad ideas.
Yeah, and I don't think that means there's never a place to say like, hey, we are boxed in. Every bad idea, like let's get as many bad ideas on the whiteboard as we can, because oftentimes like creativity comes from combining things, and I'm like, that's really stupid. But what if we put those two things together?
Yeah.
And I think we've had some great ideas over the years from just, I would never do that and I would never do that, but pieces of them together could be really cool.
Yeah.
So I think brainstorming has its place, but it needs to be limited. I think it gets out of hand when it's every discussion we want to just throw out dumb ideas and then everyone's supposed to affirm them.
Right.
I'm like, well, that's not the most productive way.
No, and you've got to be very careful of groupthink and the idea that people just, are kind of yes to other people's ideas without really thinking through them, or yes to the favorite people. Thankfully, we won't have a lot of that in our group meetings because of the relationships we have.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of organizations where, you just only accept the idea of the person who's you're trying to impress,
The boss or
the boss, right? And so, truly being able to have good ideas, I think, is pretty important.
There are some really great ways of evaluating that are actually more systematic than we often do, that I've used in meetings. Things like everyone brings an idea, we write all of those on the whiteboard, and then maybe all of us get 3 votes. And so you can go and you can do it different ways. We could say you can cast them all for the same one if you want, but you only get 3 votes, or you have to cast a vote for 3 different things. And then it's like, we're only going to evaluate as a group the top 3. So maybe we had 15 ideas, 7 of them get votes, but only the top 3 get a lot of votes. And It's like, okay, yeah, let's spend some time really drilling down on those and exploring so that, we kind of see, because often what you find then is people don't even vote for their own idea. They're like, oh, I love these ideas, or you can say you can vote for as many of those ideas as you want. 3 or 4 will still rise to the top, So I think there are more structured ways of evaluating ideas. I think there's just, it is hard emotionally at first. I don't find it hard anymore, but like where I bring up an idea to a meeting, because I feel like I'm giving and then people are like, wow, the problem with that is this and this and this. And you have to push past some of that because there's a lot of pride there. I'm like, I am at a place in my life. And of course, there's a security in being like the team leader in most of the meetings I'm in, but where I'm like, I throw out an idea. Like, I'm delighted when someone has a better idea than me. Like, I'm like, great. I would rather do the best idea. Like, and often the best idea is tweaked and refined by the team. So it does take some like letting go of the like, my ego is somehow tied up with everyone liking this, and seeing that even if I throw out an idea that's bad, that may advance, or that no one really likes, that still can advance the team. It can advance the discussion. It's a part of the process.
Right.
This is a great one. If you were a younger staff member with an idea, what steps would you take to initiate it?
Assuming that it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Younger staff person.
Or maybe just what steps would you take if you have what you think is a really good idea?
Man, I don't know how to answer that exactly.
I feel like, I don't know that I have like a step by step, but I'm like, I'm very one-on-one is how it's done. Like, so I would start by running my idea past multiple individuals
Oh yeah.
in
Okay.
the
Okay.
meetings that I normally have.
Okay. I wasn't thinking. I was thinking about going straight to the doing of the idea.
Yeah, they said initiate, but I'm
But
like, I'm
yeah,
kind of thinking like,
yeah.
what
You
would
gotta
I?
ask.
I
Okay.
mean,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
how do
Well, I'm
you?
on the same
So
page.
it's like, and then because I always want to, like, I'm not just refining my idea. I'm building buy-in before it ever goes before the staff, so that
Oh
it's
yeah.
like once I
Okay.
pitch it to the team, which so then I would
It's
probably
not the first
ask
time
like,
hearing
hey,
it.
can
Yeah.
this be on the agenda? It's not their first time hearing it, and their input has already been incorporated into the pitch, so they're owning it,
That's right.
and then I would give them credit. It's like, oh, I've talked about this, Brad and Peter and so, and I like, we've been talking about this idea, and I had this, but Brad brought up this great point that I had not thought about. And then it's like, and then it's like, and we want to bring this to y'all for your, and then we, again, it's not like sink or swim that idea as
Right.
is. It's like keep refining. I just feel like that's how you build a coalition. Like the team is beginning to own this as they make it better than what I ever had in the first place. And there's a lot of like listening to other people before I put my foot down on
Yeah.
like, are we going to do it or not? Um,
And
yeah.
I think the initiated part, you just have to start small.
Yes.
I did this e-team thing at UTD and at UNT, and I didn't start small enough. I made it an entire team and made it my like almost like my legacy project, and it just didn't work. And partly it didn't work because I put too many resources into it.
Yeah.
It's like I see people with they got a business idea, and so instead of like do a little on the side while they're working, they're like, all right, get a big loan, get all this equipment, and I'm like,
Yeah.
just start small. That's maybe a terrible idea.
Yeah.
So I think I learned that
Or it may be the germ of a good idea that needs to be
a
refined
lot. Yes,
before we put a lot of resources.
that's right. So
Because
just
yeah,
start
like
small.
we did the E-team idea together. You led it, but I was equally responsible for throwing so many resources at it. And I think, yeah, if I was doing that now, I'd be like, pick your two favorite
That's right.
people
Yep. Send them
that
out.
you're so excited, like work with them, do that, and then let's kind of see, how
Yeah.
does that go? And Mandy and I were talking about that with an idea yesterday that I was like, I just want to try it once before the semester. Or no, it was Peter and I. I was like, I want to try it once before the semester's over because we were talking about this practicum idea for staff, like following an older staff person for a week. And I was like, what if we just like do one day with only the apprentices this semester and just see what it's even like? Get some feedback from everyone.
Sure.
It's like low cost. And then we can plan rather than just like making this big plan for a week in the fall. Like, who knows? After that one day, we may be like, 2 or 3 days would probably be plenty.
Yeah.
It's like a week is just arbitrary. Like, and so I think, yeah, I'm more into that kind of thing now.
Oh yeah.
Live
and learn.
What's the balance between R&D and consistently doing what has a proven track record?
Man, that's hard. Balance questions are always
Yeah.
hard, but I think you have to just kind of constantly, do both. As long as the proven track record isn't, as long as it's not a major value,
Mm-hmm.
then just because it's got a good track record doesn't necessarily mean we've got to keep doing it or doing it the same way. I think so many of these business books that I get recommended or ministry books, it's like, oh, we found some new proven track record.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, but there's some of that can be kind of soulless if it's not really backed by what you're doing in mission. And so I think it just goes back to the mission mindset. Like it has to be tied to what we're about.
Well, and so much of the methodology that really hits and works in one place, it's not soulless there because it grew from those people and their hearts and their talents and their relationships. But when you try to like take their method and it's not them, it's kind of like, it didn't work the same way.
That's right.
But I also think R&D is a word. I think that sometimes when people think of innovating or research and development, they think like big swings. It's like Google's going to start a, mission to Mars or something. It's like, it's got to be something that no one's ever done before and no one's ever thought about. Like vast majority of R&D is incremental.
Yeah, they're minor tweaks.
You know, it's like if we can, especially with these big companies. I was listening to this podcast and they were talking about airline food, and they were saying that I can't remember the exact number, but it was they were talking about salads in first class meals on one of the big airlines. It was either United or American, and that they like had done this different stuff, and they removed one cherry tomato, and it saved like $100 million a year because they're buying so many of those salads, and it's just an insane amount of money that can be saved by these tiny tweaks. And or a packaging that wastes less dressing or something. It's like just tiny little things. And I think sometimes I'm like, yeah, maintaining the status quo in R&D aren't often like two totally polar opposites. I'm like, we can be R&Ding to make the status quo better in ways that are significant over the long run, but they may not feel radically different or unsettling.
Right.
And I think we got to be able to do both.
Yeah, I agree.
Make things a little bit better, So, and I think some people are better at one than the other.
I think the other thing too about R&D is it's got to kind of be a constant thing that happens, not just in a meeting or in a debrief, but like an in the moment, write it down.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wonder how many times you've done something for too long and someone had an idea one Friday night focus or Thursday night focus and then just failed to mention it or think through it.
Or we just did it and it was great and we never thought about it again.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. It's just to be able to kind of constantly write that down.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm big into writing almost everything down, so that we can kind of, think on it and see it in the moment. Because, we generally feel it much more strongly in the moment. They're like, oh, I don't want, that's not good, or this was awesome. And so, doing that in the moment, writing it down, making sure that gets spoken, not just at some debrief or something like that, but kind of having the constant mindset of how do we make this better? How do we do this? Great, rather than just falling back on the same thing over and over.
Yeah. What's the number one barrier? Not number one, but what's the number one barrier preventing people from driving new initiatives?
Fear of mentioning them.
Yeah.
Fear of having support for it. We live in such an individualized society. If you have an idea, sometimes maybe it's kind of seen as your baby, your thing, so you don't get buy-in, as you talked about, maybe, and then you're kind of failing. Not fleshing it out, maybe.
I think sometimes fear of sacrifice.
Yeah.
Sure. Like if I do this new thing, I give up some of what I like about what we're doing now. Or if I go to this new campus, I give up my place here.
Mm-hmm.
I do think fear is a lot.
Yeah, fear is definitely.
And that was one of the other questions here. Is like, how do you move past fear? Which, how do you move past fear in general? It's like...
Yeah, and I don't think you need to move past fear. I think there has to be a little bit of fear when you innovate, because it's a motivator of fearing like, okay, this could fail. If everything succeeded, then, everyone would try everything all the time. There's a reason stuff works and doesn't work. I think fear can be a good... No, I'm talking, lowercase fear.
Yeah.
Just fear of like, I'm really paying attention to this.
Yeah, exactly.
Being vigilant of, is this working? What feedback am I
fear
getting?
keeps us alive.
Yes.
We're not supposed to push past every fear.
Yeah, that's right. And
like my fear of cliffs.
Yeah,
I don't need to like go leaping off them or anything.
Yeah. I think that's it's good. It's good for you when you're starting something. Okay, do I have enough salary to make this work? Could this turn into something bigger? There's just a lot of fear type questions that give you anxiety, and those are not bad. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think.
But I like your lowercase fear versus like uppercase fear, where
every move
fear becomes
this is going to end it. This is all bad.
And I think a lot of it's faith, right?
That's
it's just like, be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid. I'm with you. Like God repeats those. And courage is not about not having fear. It's about weighing fear and risk and God's promises and reward. And
it's not the opposite of fear. Courage is.
Yeah, it's about pushing through it.
Right.
And when appropriate. Because again, people that jump off cliffs, we're not like, how courageous. It's like, we're like, how stupid.
Yeah.
But there are people who, yeah, do things I was like, I'd be very scared to do that. But we do honor them for their courage. And so, yeah, there's a weighing there. I think a lot of people are waiting for fear to go away,
Yeah.
capital F, rather than doing what they're afraid of.
Yeah.
And just allowing it. And because that's sometimes, it's like most of the phobias, the main way they treat phobias is through exposure.
Yeah, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. Boom.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
And, and I think we have to acknowledge that fear is certainly mental, spiritual, but it's also physiological.
Yeah.
And especially when you get into phobias and stuff, it's like, it's real, but does that make it okay to just live in it?
Right.
No, I've got to, it's agoraphobic people who never leave their home anymore. And it's like, no, that's not the life of flourishing that God has for you. And so I think we have to, but again, what's the exposure to that? I don't know. Like a lot of times, people that are guiding people through that start small. I remember hearing a lady on maybe like an NPR interview. She was talking about that she's like, I've flown and traveled my whole life. And then one day I just like developed an unreasonable fear of flying. And she's like, for years, I wouldn't go anywhere. She's like, I missed my sister's wedding. I did, and then she was like, I have to get over this. Like, I'm not going to live in this anymore. And so there was like a class at her local airport. She's like, I go to the airport every week and we would learn about like flying safety. And she was like, in the last like couple of weeks, we would go sit on a plane. And she was like, she's like, the whole class is freaking out. And, and she's just like, we're all having these like major fear responses. And the plane was not going anywhere. It had no pilot. Like, and she's like, but it's like, in my mind, it's like, what if a pilot comes in here and then takes off and then we go and the wings fall off and we plummet, and
expectation.
She's like, but I had to sit in that plane seat. and she's like, and now she's like, I'm not saying I'm never afraid, but I go where I need to go. Yeah. And I'm not going to miss another wedding of someone I love dearly. And I'm not, and I don't know. It's just that story has stuck with me for a lot of years of like, I see how much anxiety is eating up, especially younger people in our culture. And they've just given into it. They've taken on the identity of I'm an anxious person. And that allows me to live in fear all the time and somehow validates it. But I think this scripture, while some kinds of fear are good and right, other kinds of fear really are seen as the opposite of trusting God.
Yeah.
And so they do have a moral dimension. And I think we have to be careful of naming that for other people. But we need to be able to name it for ourselves in prayer and stuff.
Oh,
so
I remember when I was doing some anger management counseling years back, one of the counselors told me, anger is really kind of like the difference between what you expected and what you're experiencing. And I think there's some analogy there to fear too, because fear is often, I expect it, I'm expecting something terrible to happen, but then when you really get into the experience, it's not near as terrible as you thought. So I think a lot of fear is almost like expecting terrible things to happen when it's not a real thing. It's like having a panic attack and letting someone know, like, listen, your body's feeling this, but it's actually not real. So you don't have to experience it if you don't want to. But you have to train out of that. So.
Yeah. Well, I had a guy, I've told this story before, but I had a guy, super bright guy that was in our UT ministry pre-med student. And I just saw him living in so much fear of failure. And I'm like, and he was not failing. And I sat down with them one day in the union and I was asking them, I was like, okay, like, what's the worst thing that could happen? And it's kind of like that I wouldn't get into med school. And I'm like, okay, tell me about it. And then what? And then what? And then what? Yep. And, and just kind of trying to talk him through. And I was like, listen, man, I was like, on the day that you don't get into med school, which probably won't happen, you would still be very smart, handsome, male, which gives you advantages, American, which gives you advantages, middle to upper middle class, which gives you,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm like walking, you know, you're athletic, you have a lot of friends, you have all this stuff. And I was like, you have all that on what you call the worst day of your life. And I was like, so let's say you get to the worst day of your life. What percentage of the world population do you think would want to trade places with you that
Yeah.
day?
Sure.
And he's like, probably about 90%. And I was like, if not more, you know, and I'm like, you got to keep it. And he's told me in years, you know, since that was like a turning point. Like, he's like, yeah, I had to come back to reality
That's right.
about it. Didn't make it not scary anymore, but it's like, I'm not going to let that rule my life.
That's right.
And of course he's a doctor and doing his deal, you know, just fine. But yeah, it was a pivot point. And it was neat because then I saw one of the next conversations we had was about dating, and I saw him be so much bolder, you know, and he's happily married to that girl. So
That's awesome.
Anyway, well, thanks for making time.
You forgot the last question.
Oh, do you want to do one more? What is
Yeah,
it?
there's one more question. I finally found the tab.
Oh, okay. How do you?
We've kind of already talked about
Yeah,
this, but
okay.
I think we could give
Go
them
for it.
a couple
Yeah, go
questions.
for it.
Yeah. So
Sounds
how do
good.
you harness creativity if you don't see
Mm.
yourself as particularly innovative? And Brandon already alluded to this. Sometimes it's in conversation with others.
Mhm.
For me, it's a little bit more. I have to kind of get alone and kind of think, and I have to access that part of my brain that's about story and about dreaming and about
Mhm.
vision. It's a lot of what the scripture is. It's just kind of like creative ways of saying the same thing
Mhm.
about who God is. Certainly, writing activities can be pretty helpful. But I think at the end of the day, to me, what's most I think productive is what we've already mentioned, and that's just to kind of like jot down an idea, like what's something that is kind of annoying to you
Mhm.
or doesn't really make sense of why we do it, and how could you think about doing it somewhat differently.
Mhm.
It's hard, I think, as someone who tends to think of themselves as pretty creative, to give a lot of advice on how to be creative.
Yeah.
You're constantly thinking of how can we do this differently.
Mhm.
You know, but I'm trying to put myself in that situation, or if I'm talking to people who don't feel
Yeah.
particularly creative, what is it that they do? And I'm going to go back to this a million times, but I don't know if I have a great way of making sure it happens. You have to get into a space in your brain where it's not just thinking, analyzing.
Yeah.
You have to kind of dream some and just be like, okay, what is it? What could we do
Mhm.
if the world could be different, or if it could be perfect how I want it?
Mhm.
How can we do this better? And there's a space in that just feels very human and really neat, because you're doing what God does in terms of creating, envisioning this kind of new world,
Mhm.
this new story, this new reality. So I'm more speaking about it in terms of how exciting it is, and it's not being very helpful on
Well, no,
how to do it.
I heard this talk a bunch of years ago that has stuck with me. It was some guy talking about creativity, but he was kind of saying, he's like, you know, only God can create new things. We don't create things. We combine things that God made in new ways. You know, and he's like, that's what we do when we build and stuff. Is like, we're not creating something out of nothing. And so he was kind of talking about new ideas as sort of creative combinations of existing things. And I was like, yeah, I see that a lot. Like I love going to Sikkim every year and seeing what they're doing, and just like, oh, you did that, and not because I'm like, I take each idea and I'm like, I'm either gonna do it or not do it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, often I'm like, ooh, that would never work, but I love this little piece of it, or I like this thing. What if we did that at this thing we're already doing? And it's just, and he told this goofy story about some inventor who made like, he made like a urinal that had a sink on top or something. And so it's like, you would like use the urinal, and then when you washed your hands in the sink, the soapy water would clean the urinal. So there wasn't a flush. And he's like, yeah, you're like combining sink and urinal into one new, better idea or something. I was like, oh my God. Still have never seen the sink urinal in the wild. But
That reminds me of Impractical Jokers. Have you ever seen them have to pitch bad ideas?
I don't know, but I want to
they're
watch that.
so good. They have to pitch bad ideas to like a focus group. It's so good. It just reminds me of
Okay,
how,
I need to find that.
yeah, you do.
That's
Fine.
great.
Anyway,
That's great.
but yeah, I think a lot of ideas are
Link in
pretty
the
bad.
show notes.
Yeah,
We don't
right.
have
A
that.
lot of ideas are pretty bad, so it's just kind of okay. It's freeing. Like,
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
it's just fun to come up with a really
But
bad
I think
idea.
sometimes hearing about idea, like we laugh and we play, and then it will spark creativity in someone else. And I'm like, and that's a win.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah. Well, we'll do this one more time. We've got half the other questions, and we've already taken close to an hour and a half. So I'm going to end here. But
Great.
thanks again for making time. This has been
Awesome.
a lot of fun to talk about. So I have no idea how to stop this. Darby's not here.
My wife somewhere walking around getting coffee.
Yeah, let's see what happens.